Finally, the virtual power shop is here, guys. Are you feeling stuck, insecure, or maybe second guessing some choices in life? Visit thevirtualpowershop.com to enroll in your 22 module course. It's self-paced and available on your terms. What's your well-being worth? Act now for a limited time offer. It's half off the regular $299 price. Your personalized journey is available for only $149. Step into a brighter, empowered future. Thevirtualpowershop.com. Get unstuck. I'm Alma Lee. I'm a psychotherapist and transformative lifestyle resiliency coach and author, and I want to help you reach your goals by teaching you how to step outside of those fear-based mindsets and into your powerful, loving self. Let's get started. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said this. He said this in a national announcement. And I want to talk about fear, from fear to love. We talk about being fearful. We hear about being fearful. Media, conversations, relationships. We know that we're fearful, and yet we still avoid and refuse to acknowledge the things that hold us down, the things that keep us stuck in life, and that's fear. A big part of this work is when I have conversations with people, with clients, with friends, anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, it almost always comes up. The conversation circles around a fear of some type, and we encapsulate ourselves in egotistical methodologies, habits, situations, relationships that protect us from having to touch on or address the fear. And, I know that this episode, any episode really, is only a seed for thought. It's just something to get you really to unpack the things that are keeping you out of your joy, out of your love, out of your growth, and finding out what it is you need to do and need to address in life. I'm sitting here, I'm currently recording this in my Airbnb here in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, on the tail end of my travels to Italy. It's been a whirlwind experience. It's been a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I'm fighting a little bit of a headache, but I know that while something is on the forefront of my mind is when I need to share it the most because it's when I feel most inspired to record it. But I want to push through this and get this off the top of my head and share with you and inspire you, hopefully, into asking yourself a simple question. What is it that you're afraid of? What are you afraid of? And your fear, what is the worst fear you can imagine? Have you thought about what you're afraid of? And then when you think about it, when you really address it and stare it down, what does it mean to address that fear? So let me do a little bit of an experiment here with you while I've got this recording going. And I'm just recording this off the cuff as I'm just thinking about it. When I sit here and I think about my own fears, because obviously I can't do this if I'm not going to be transparent and set the example. So obviously, the initial knee-jerk response to that question to me would be something happening to my children. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I would be able to overcome. I would be a shell of a person if something happened to my children. I mean, we all know people who have lost children and then they go on about their lives. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they're resilient and they've found something else to focus their lives on aside from their children. It doesn't mean that they didn't love their children. It just means that they picked it up and they kept it moving. So the truth is that I love my kids. I want my kids to be healthy. I want my kids to always reach their goals. But if something were to happen to my kids, it would be devastating. It would be a horrible thing. But I would figure it out and I would move on. So I have to keep asking the question. So really and truthfully, that is a fearful thing. But when I get underneath all of that, the truth is that if something were to happen to my children, because that's what standard societal and cultural programming says, that in order to be a good person, you need to love your children more than yourself. And I do love my kids. I love my kids deeply. I lose my train of thought and get choked up when I worry about my kids. But underneath all of that is a fear of failure. Because think about it. Society says, as a woman, I'm supposed to take care of my family first. I'm supposed to take care of my kids first. And I'm required to abandon myself in order to be successful in doing that. That's a lie. That's a lie. And I've said this to my kids. My kids know how I feel about this. I don't want my kids to live for me, and I don't want my kids to live for anybody else. I want my kids to live for themselves, just as I deserve to live for myself. So, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of losing myself. Because I've been there before. And what we typically attribute to as just a standard diagnosis of major depression disorder, if I can speak, and anxiety, the reality is the reason that you experience those symptoms is because you lost yourself. And that to me is terrifying. That's what I fear the most, is not knowing who I am or why I'm here. Because I can sit here and I can say, having children is the reason that I was brought into this earth. No, that's a part of it. I was definitely required. Part of my purpose was to bring these two wonderful humans into existence, for sure. And they are wonderful, but they're their own person. They're no more a part of me than anybody else that I'm attached to or connected to. I'm not required to give my life up in order for them to be able to exist, nor are they required to give up their lives to take care of me either. See, that's one of the biggest lies I think that we're told, is that we're supposed to live for other people before we live for ourselves. No, I think it's backwards. I think that the fear that most of us have is not knowing who the hell we are to begin with. And I think that's the root of a lot of the problems that we face, is because society has groomed within us this program that, guess what? If you take care of your spouse and you take care of your kids, then you're going to get everything. You're going to reap the reward of everything that you've ever desired and wanted. No, I think it's wonderful to be in a healthy relationship with someone that you enjoy spending time with, that challenges you to do better and grow, especially when that person has the same values as you and wants to raise children with you and have beautiful, wonderful children. But by no means is that the end-all, be-all of your existence, whether you're a mother or a father. So my biggest fear is to lose myself, is to not live in my purpose, because I believe that my purpose is to constantly be self-aware enough to where I am continually spiritually evolving into the highest version of who I can be until my meat suit expires on me and then I transcend back to consciousness. Because there is no such thing as death. There's that mindset of death and dying, that's also a construct. It doesn't exist. We don't lose people. They just lose their meat suit. That's it. I had coffee with my mother this morning. I flew through Vegas yesterday on my way into Birmingham on my travels. When I was 13, my father took me to Vegas. I think maybe we went a couple of times, but I distinctly remember a trip he took me to Vegas when I was 13, and we stayed at the Stardust Hotel. And he was gambling. He was playing blackjack in the Flamingo, and I was 13, and I had lost him, and I was scared, and I tried to cut behind the dealer table. Of course, I was 13. I didn't know what I was doing. And the whole time, my father was watching me, but I was scared, and he didn't care because he was playing blackjack. And the security guards grabbed me by my shoulder and pulled me out and threw me out onto the front. He goes, and the guy screamed at me, "I don't know, you're not old enough to be out here anyway." And he was just doing his job. He wasn't a babysitter. He was just trying to keep security. My dad comes running out after me. It was terrifying. But he did make it up to me. He took me to Circus. And we played the games at Circus. So it ended up being a really good trip. Yesterday, as I'm walking through what used to be McCarran Airport to catch my flight, I felt my father with me. And he was being goofy. He's like, hey, you want to go to the Flamingo? He's like, come on, you're old enough now. Let's go play some blackjack. And it was just a moment, just a passing moment. And I think because of where I'm at in my consciousness now, that I'm able to be open to those experiences where when he chooses to connect with me, which now I'm open to, they just happen organically. And it's all tying into my purpose. It's all tying into my role here in my work that I'm doing on this earth, to challenge other people to think differently, to challenge the status quo. Love your families, love your children, but don't forget to love yourself, and don't forget to put yourself first. That's the work. That's the thing. That's why we struggle. That to me, in my opinion, is the root of all depression and anxiety, is because you've been taught to not put yourself first. You've been told that it's wrong, so you don't do it. And so you get desperate in trying to find it in other people. And then you get into these lackluster connections where you give your power away in hopes that that person will help you find the thing that you should be finding within yourself to begin with, you see. So relationships are great. Romantic partnerships are wonderful. If you can find someone healthy who respects you and wants to connect with you on the same vibration that you're on, I think that's awesome. Go for it. But it shouldn't be the forefront. It shouldn't be centered. Having children should not be centered. Having a profession should not be centered. Your purpose. That's where it's at. So when you talk about fear, like what Franklin Delano Roosevelt was talking about, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Because when we live in fear, we avoid learning more about ourselves. We avoid learning more about who and what we are and what we're capable of. Holy cow. Gosh, you're capable of so much. Sometimes I have these epiphanies, these moments where it just becomes so clear in just a snapshot, or just a brief blip of time, where I am undoubtedly just wholly conscious and aware in my consciousness, in my present state, my mindful present state, of just how incredibly powerful we all are. All of us. If you just step out of fear. Because fear is the trap. Fear is what keeps you stuck. Fear is what keeps you from taking risk. Fear of being alone. So that's why you stay with an abusive, narcissistic partner. Fear of not being good enough in the eyes of your parents, or the eyes of your family, or the eyes of your friend, because you choose to parent differently, because you're so fearful of other people's judgment of you. I tell people, and I'm sure if you've listened to this for a while, you know that you're always going to have haters. The moment that you get comfortable with other people's judgment, you take your power back. And it doesn't mean you're a bitter, resentful person by saying, I don't care what you think about me. It just means that you're focusing your energy on the right things by saying, I don't care what you think about me. I know that it's a hard thing to do, to stop caring about what other people think. I have empathy for anybody who's kind of stuck in that, because I've been there. But you'll never move out of it if you don't make moves to do so. If you don't choose to really sit with the idea of what is it that you fear. Seriously. I had a gentleman, a good friend of mine from years and years ago, high school. We've known each other for over 30 years. I made a reel on Instagram of the mountains in Boulder, Colorado. And he sends me a message and says, gosh, I've always dreamed about living in Colorado. It's just so expensive. And I wrote him back and I sent him a message and I said, all you have to do is just do it. If you really want to do something, you can make excuses until the cows come home. But the reality is that you just choose to lean into fear. You can say that you want to live in Colorado. Maybe you really do. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's an alluring thing to think about, but in reality, you want to stay safe in your own fear. And his justification was that it's too expensive. And I said, look, you're not a dummy. And I know that you make a decent wage living, where you live. There are people in Colorado that make far less than you that are able to live in Colorado. It makes no sense. Your argument holds no water. If you want to do it, why don't you do it? It's because you're fearful. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Me? I'm afraid of not continuing to grow, of not constantly reaching more and more people and inspiring people to change and to evolve, to become better versions of themselves. Why do I want that? That's a good question. It's my purpose, but I know it's deeper than that. Maybe that's something I need to meditate on. I don't know why I want it. I just know that I do. I just know that it makes me feel connected to the highest version of who I am in my consciousness, to know that my life is impacting people in a positive way and that it's shifting people's mindsets into something more positive. I know that everything that I do and the way I touch lives and the way that I challenge people to think differently, it ties in even to my inner child, my wounded inner child, because I can remember. Let me tell you this. I remember being on an airplane when I was, maybe 10. I think we were flying to Arizona to see my grandparents. And my father and my mother, we were all there together. And, I'm a little kid. And I remember distinctly, having these thoughts of what if the plane crashes? Oh my gosh, what'll happen? What'll happen to me? And even then at a young age, I knew that I had something I needed to do. And so I couldn't die at a young age. I can remember thinking that. And I can also remember thinking that, well, if the plane does crash, I know that I'm going to stand up in front of everybody and I'm going to tell everybody it's okay. It's not going to be bad. I was 10 years old thinking that. I was 10 years old already thinking that I needed to help people to not have fear. I was thinking about that the other day. And it's just something it's the reason I was born. It's a part of I'm here to do this work and to channel information to help people move outside of mindsets that keep them stuck. I see it. I had conversation with a girlfriend yesterday while I was waiting for my flight. And she's struggling in this relationship with this person who's not showing up for her. And I'm like, sweetheart, it's not about him. It's about you. You're mad because he's not doing for you what you're not doing for you. You're mad because you gave him your power because you're expecting him to make you feel better about yourself, when in reality, he can't do that for you. Nobody can. Nobody can make you feel better about yourself but you. And it's because of fear that we don't do that. What are you afraid of? What are you scared of? Think about the things that you don't say out loud and have that conversation with yourself. Be honest with yourself. I'll admit, saying it for the first time out loud that I love my kids. My kids are not my purpose, and I'm not my kids' purpose. And that doesn't make me less of a mother, and it doesn't make me less of a good person. It's actually quite freeing because it allows me to keep it moving, because it allows me to not be embedded and codependent in my children and attached to them while they're adults, because now that, my daughter's 15, but she's almost. But now that they're independent, free-thinking individuals who are not so codependent on me, frees up me to do what I need to do in my purpose. And I'm always, I'm there for my kids. I love my kids. I'll always be connected to my children. I'll always love my children and encourage my children. But my children are not my identity, and I shouldn't be theirs either. That's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, especially people who don't know who they are and they have children. So they've wrapped their own identity up into being a parent. And it's too much pressure for an adult anyway, who has a mother or a father that they can't seem to disconnect from and live their own life because they've constantly got to reassure their parents that, yes, I'm coming home for Thanksgiving. Yes, I'm doing Christmas or whatever with you. Your children are not your purpose. Your responsibility is to your children up to a certain point. You got to take care of them. You got to set them up for success. You got to feed them. You got to love them. You got to encourage them. You got to support them. You got to prioritize them to a certain point. But once they're off on their own, it's time to keep it moving. It's time to look back into yourself and redefine who you are. That's the whole empty nester thing. And just to use that as an example. What are you afraid of? What are you fearful of? What's keeping you stuck? Dream big, because I promise you, anything that you can conceive of, you can have it once you step out of fear. All right. This has been a Lee Bird Media production. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.